Perfect square numbers. So perfect square numbers are numbers that make squares. So when we talk about perfect square numbers, we can draw perfect square numbers on a grid by making squares. So it says draw the first 8 perfect squares in the grid below. So I've drawn for you the first perfect square number. That perfect square number is 1. So if we take a look at that first square, that has an area of 1 square. The next perfect square is when we have a side length of 2, or 2 squared, and that's going to make 4 squares. So if we look at that square there, it's going to cover 4 squares of area. So squares measure area, and perfect squares make square areas on a grid. So our first 2 perfect square numbers are 1, which is 1 squared, 4, which is 2 squared. The next one is going to be 9, which is going to be 8 squared. So if I draw my square with side length of 3, that is going to be my next perfect square number, which is 9. And I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, that makes a perfect square shape. The next one is going to be a 4 square. So I draw a side length of 4 and 4. And this is going to give me a square area. Now, if I count up the squares in this area, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So the next perfect square number is 16. So I have 1, 4, 9, 16. The next one is going to be our 5 square. So I'm going to draw a square with side length 5. That is going to be our next size perfect square. And this one's going to have 5 by 5. So if I do 5 times 5, I can count. There's going to be 25 squares in that figure. So our square numbers, perfect square numbers, are going to be 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. That's the first 5. The next one is going to be 36. We're going to get 36 squares in here. And that's going to be a 6 by 6 square. So 36. So I want you to make sure that you've drawn these squares on your grid. The next square is going to be a 7 square. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have to be a little bit more careful with these ones because it's a little bit easier to lose track of the number of squares. But if it doesn't look square, it's probably not a perfect square. So if I count a 7 by 7 square, I can count up all those squares inside. There's going to be 40 now. Now, if we can always count them individually, but in this case here, I can be fairly certain that that's going to be 49 because I have 7 times 7. And then the 8th one is going to be an 8 by 8 square. And again, we want to make sure that that looks like a square. And there's 8 by 8 square. And again, we can count up individually, but if we multiply 8 times 8, we're going to get the square of 64. So 49 is going to be a 7 square. 64 is an 8 square. There are my first 8 perfect square numbers.